He shoved her, 2 hands, full chest, in front of 60 recruits at 0500. Master Sergeant Brennan Cole, 6'2", 240 pounds, 22 years and 7 months in the United States Marine Corps. Senior Drill Instructor of Platoon 2049, 2nd Recruit Training Battalion, Marine Corps Recruit Depot Parris Island. He put both palms flat on her plate carrier and drove her back 3 steps in the sand of the crucible pit. She didn't stumble. She didn't yell. She didn't reach for a radio. She stepped inside the arc of his arms, hooked the outside of his right ankle with the inside edge of her boot, drove her left hand up under his chin, and dropped him. For seconds, his campaign cover came off mid-fall. The Smoky Bear, 22 years of sweat ring on the inside band, salt-stained green felt, the leather sweatband worn smooth where his thumb had pressed it 10,000 times. It rolled into the pit and stopped against a recruit's boot. Recruit Henson, Detroit, 19 years old. The kid Cole had been screaming at for 15 minutes when she walked over and told him to step back. 60 recruits stopped breathing at the exact same second. The air came out of Cole in one sound. Half cough, half nothing. He hit the sand with his shoulder blades flat, the back of his skull a quarter-inch from a railroad tie that marked the edge of the pit. His arms went out to the sides. His hands opened. His eyes stayed open. He didn't move. She stood over him, right boot next to his left ear. Campaign cover squared. Plate carrier still rocking from the shove. She didn't look angry. That's the part everyone who was there remembers first. She didn't look angry. She looked the way you look when you've already done the math and the math is finished. Cold. Clean. Done. She looked down at him once. She said it quiet, almost gentle, the way you talk to a horse that just thrashed itself out of a panic and is finally still. Get up, Marine. Recruit needs you upright. He got up. He didn't get up fast. He rolled to his side first. He put one hand in the sand and pushed. He got to a knee. He reached for the cover and Recruit Henson, without being told, picked it up and held it out to him in both hands, the way recruits are taught to hand things to drill instructors. Cole took it. He didn't put it on. He held it against his chest plate, brim down, both hands, the way Marines hold a cover at a funeral. He stood the rest of the way up. He brushed the sand off his trousers. He walked 4 steps to Recruit Henson, and he stopped in front of him. He said one sentence to that recruit. I want you to hear it exactly the way it was said. Because 11 years later, Henson, who is now Staff Sergeant Henson, 1st Marine Division, Camp Pendleton, can still tell you the cadence and the volume and the pause in the middle. He told me himself. He told me at a Waffle House outside Oceanside in March of last year. He said his senior drill instructor leaned down so only he could hear it and said, Recruit, I owe you 4 miles. We're going to walk him together. You understand me? Henson said, I, senior drill instructor. Cole said, on your feet. Henson got on his feet, and the two of them, the senior who had just been put on his back by a gunnery sergeant in front of 60 recruits, and the recruit with the stress fracture in his left tibia he hadn't told anyone about, walked the last 4 miles of the crucible together. Cole carried Henson's ruck on top of his own for the last mile and a half. He didn't say a word. He just walked. Pace walked 3 steps behind them. She didn't say a word either. 60 recruits walked behind her. Nobody filed a report. Not her. Not him. Not one of those 60 recruits. I know because I pulled the 2nd Recruit Training Battalion incident log for the month of October 2014. 347 pages. Every limp, every blister, every kid who pissed himself on the gas chamber, every recruit who tried to swallow a razor blade in the head at 0200. Every page, cover to cover. There is no entry for a gunnery sergeant putting a master sergeant on his back in the crucible pit at 0500 on the morning of October 17th. Officially, It didn't happen. Unofficially, it rewrote the male side of Parris Island. My name is Hatch Holloway. I retired from the United States Marine Corps in 2011, 28 years in, last 6 as a Marine gunner. I taught civilians how to shoot at a private range outside Beaufort, South Carolina, for 11 years after that. I drove past the bridge from Beaufort to Parris Island twice a week for those 11 years. I drove past a Waffle House on Boundary Street every Saturday. I didn't know what was happening in that Waffle House for 9 years. I know now. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you the whole thing. I'm going to tell you about a gunnery sergeant named Devin Pace out of Toledo, Ohio. First woman in the history of the United States Marine Corps to wear a drill instructor's campaign cover on the male side of 2nd Recruit Training Battalion. I'm going to tell you about the sentence Master Sergeant Brennan Cole said to her on her first day, before he knew who she was, before he'd read her jacket, before he'd watched her cycle a single recruit. And I'm going to tell you the 4 years he spent taking that sentence back. The way he finally took it back didn't involve words. It involved a piece of green felt. It involved a Waffle House across the river. It involved a cup of black coffee that is still being poured every other Saturday to this day. But to understand the cover and the coffee, you have to start at the breakfast. July 28th, 2014, 0700. Drill Instructor School Graduation Breakfast, 2nd Recruit Training Battalion, MCRD Parris Island. A long room with white walls and fluorescent lights and a chow line at the back. 14 drill instructors at a long table. All male. All in dress blue Charlies. 13 of them somewhere between Staff Sergeant and Gunnery Sergeant. One of them, at the head of the table, a Master Sergeant. Brennan Cole. Senior Drill Instructor, Platoon 2049, in cycle. Mustache like a push broom. Hands the size of catcher's mitts. 22 years in the Corps and one expression on his face that he wore from reveille to taps, and that expression said, "I have seen everything and I am not impressed." The doors opened. She walked in. Dress blue Charlies, squared away to the millimeter. Campaign cover under her left arm. She hadn't been authorized to wear it on her head yet. That comes at the noon ceremony. Black hair pulled into a regulation bun so tight you could have bounced a quarter off it. 5'7", 142 pounds. Mixed race. Her mother was Filipino. Her father was black, both from Toledo. Brown belt MCMAP tab on her left sleeve. Combat action ribbon. 2 Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medals. Distinguished Rifleman Badge. 2 pump deployments to Helmand Province with female engagement team, attached to 3rd Battalion 6th Marines in 2011 and 1st Battalion 8th Marines in 2012. She was 29 years old. She was a gunnery sergeant. She had been in the Corps for 11 years and 3 months. She walked into the room, and the 13 junior drill instructors stopped talking. Cole didn't look up from his eggs. He had a plate of scrambled eggs, for strips of bacon, 2 pieces of white toast with butter, and a cup of black coffee. He had a fork in his right hand and a knife in his left. He was cutting his bacon into half-inch pieces. He didn't stop cutting his bacon. He cut 6 pieces, set the knife down, picked up his coffee, took a sip, set the coffee down, picked the fork back up, and ate 1 piece of bacon. He chewed it twice and swallowed. Then, without looking up, he said it. He said it loud enough for the back of the room to hear. He said it the way you'd announce the score of a football game from 2 days ago. Flat. Factual. A piece of information. Females can't cycle recruits. Females cycle paperwork. Find your desk. The room laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. That's the thing people get wrong when they hear the story. It wasn't 13 men laughing at a woman. It was 13 men agreeing with their senior without having to say a word, the way enlisted Marines have agreed with their seniors since 1775. It was a laugh of confirmation, a laugh of we already knew this. The senior said the thing. The thing was true. Therefore, laughter. Move on. Pace didn't move on. She didn't answer. She didn't react. She didn't change the angle of her chin or the speed of her breathing or the position of her left arm against her campaign cover. She walked to the chow line. She picked up a plate. She got 2 scoops of scrambled eggs, 3 strips of bacon, 2 pieces of white toast, and a cup of coffee. Black. She walked back to the long table. There was one empty seat. It was directly to the right of Master Sergeant Brennan Cole, the junior drill instructor's seat, the seat where the green belt sits next to his senior. She sat in it. Cole didn't look up. She ate her breakfast in silence. She didn't put butter on her toast. She ate it dry, the way you eat in the field. She drank her coffee black. She didn't pick up her fork until she'd cut all 3 pieces of bacon into half-inch pieces with the side of her fork. She didn't have a knife. There were no knives at her place setting because nobody had set a place for her. She used the side of her fork. Cole watched her cut the bacon out of the corner of his eye. He didn't turn his head. She finished her plate. She stood up. She squared her cover under her left arm. She took her plate and her coffee cup to the bus tub at the end of the chow line. She came back to the table. She remained standing behind her chair. She said, quiet, the same volume she'd use on the parade deck, Master Sergeant. Request permission to be excused. I have a noon ceremony. Cole looked up. For the first time, he looked at her. Not at her face. At her left sleeve. At the brown belt MCMAP tab. He looked at it for 2 full seconds. Then he looked at her chest. Not in a way you'd file a report about, at her ribbons. The combat action ribbon. The 2 noms. The campaign ribbons. Iraq campaign. Afghanistan campaign. Global War on Terror Expeditionary. 3 of them, in a row, where his row had 4. He looked back down at his eggs. He said, granted. She did an about-face and walked out. The room didn't laugh that time. That was breakfast. That was day 1. That was hour 1 of a 4-year, 4-month, 11-day arc that ended on a parade deck in December of 2016 with a piece of green felt changing hands. But before we get to the parade deck, we have to get through 8 cycles, 712 recruits, 3 battalion records, 1 crucible, 1 sandpit, 1 sentence, Cole said in his senior's office at 2200 on the night of October 17, 2014, 6 hours after Pace put him on his back, that I'm going to share with you when we get there. So let's get there. At noon on July 28, 2014, Gunnery Sergeant Devin Pace stood on the parade deck of 2nd Recruit Training Battalion in dress blue Charlies with her campaign cover in both hands. The battalion commander walked up to her. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reeves, 41 years old, 2 tours in ONBAR, Naval Academy class of 95. He'd asked for her by name. He'd pulled her jacket off the assignments board at Manpower and Reserve Affairs in Quantico in March, made a phone call, and submitted a billet request for her to be assigned to 2nd Battalion as the first female drill instructor on the male side of his command. He'd had to fight for it. He'd had to write 3 memos. He'd had to brief the depot commanding general twice. He'd done all of it because he had read her jacket and he had figured out something the rest of the Marine Corps hadn't figured out yet. He had figured out that Gunnery Sergeant Pace was the best instructor he had ever read about who had not yet been a drill instructor. He pinned the campaign cover on her head himself. He stepped back. He saluted her. She returned the salute. The Sergeant Major of 2nd Battalion, a man named Ruben Vargas, 26 years in, half of them on Parris Island, took 2 steps forward and said, in a voice that carried to the back of the formation, Gunnery Sergeant Devin Pace. Reporting for duty. Drill Instructor. Platoon 2049. Senior Drill Instructor. Master Sergeant Brennan Cole. Cole was in the formation. Cole did not look at her. The ceremony ended. The formation broke. Cole walked off the parade deck without speaking to her. He walked to the senior's office at the end of the 2nd Battalion Squad Bay. He sat down at his desk. He opened the cycle binder for Platoon 2049, Week 1, Day 1, 78 recruits inbound at 1400, and he started reviewing the duty roster. He scheduled himself for first watch every night for the first 2 weeks. He scheduled Pace for second watch. Pace walked into the office at 1300. She set her sea bag against the wall. She sat down at the junior drill instructor's desk. The desk was a card table with a folding chair. There was nothing on it. There were no pens. There was no binder. There was no nameplate. She said, "Master Sergeant, request permission to review the duty roster." Cole didn't look up. He said, "Roster's done." She said, "I, Master Sergeant, request permission to review it for situational awareness." He said, "Granted." He slid the roster across the desk without looking at her. She picked it up. She read it. She read that she had been scheduled for second watch every night for 14 consecutive nights. Second watch on Parris Island runs from 2200 to 0200. It's the watch where the recruits cry. It's the watch where the recruits write letters home. It's the watch where the recruits decide whether they're going to quit in the morning. Second watch is the hardest watch to stand because nothing happens, and you have to stay awake the entire time. And you have to be ready for the one moment in 14 nights when something does happen and a recruit comes to you at 0115 with a razor blade in his hand and asks you if you can help him not use it. She set the roster back down. She said, "Master Sergeant." "Thank you." He said, "For what?" She said, "For trusting me with second watch." He looked up. For the second time that day, he looked at her face. This time he looked at her eyes. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't being sarcastic. She was thanking him, genuinely, the way a junior Marine thanks a senior Marine for an opportunity. Because second watch is an opportunity. Second watch is where you learn the platoon. Second watch is where the recruits decide whether you're worth telling the truth to. Cole knew that. He had stood second watch for the first 2 cycles of his drill instructor career in 1993 under a senior named Gunnery Sergeant Eugene Hatcher, who was now dead 9 years, and who had once told a young Sergeant Brennan Cole that second watch was the only watch that mattered. Cole looked at Gunnery Sergeant Devin Pace across the desk, and he understood, for 1 second, that she also knew that second watch was the only watch that mattered. He didn't say anything. He looked back down at his binder. She stood up. She picked up her sea bag. She said, "Master Sergeant, request permission to draw my bunk in the duty hut and report back at 1400 for recruit reception." He said, "Granted." She left. That was the first day. Recruit reception on Parris Island happens at 1400. The buses come from the airport in Charleston. Yellow school buses with the windows blacked out. 78 recruits on the bus for Platoon 2049. They had flown in from 23 states. They had been awake for 36 hours. They had been told nothing for the last 4. The bus pulled up to the receiving building, and the doors opened, and a drill instructor named Staff Sergeant Hollis stepped on the bus and screamed at them for 90 seconds, and then they were off the bus and on the yellow footprints painted on the concrete, and the world they had known until that morning was over. Gunnery Sergeant Pace stood at the end of the yellow footprints in her campaign cover and her green belt and her camis with her Gunnery Sergeant chevrons on her collar. The first recruit to look up at her, a kid named Recruit Acosta, out of El Paso, 17 years old, his mother had signed the waiver, saw her face and froze. He didn't freeze because she was a woman. He froze because she was looking at him the way his grandmother had looked at him the morning he left for Parris Island. Like she had already decided he was going to make it, and she was just waiting for him to catch up. He didn't know that's what he was seeing. He only knew it later, years later, when he was a corporal in 29 Palms, and he was teaching a new lance corporal how to clear a malfunction, and he caught himself looking at the lance corporal the same way, and he remembered where he'd seen it first. That afternoon, the recruits got their initial gear issue. 3 sets of camis, 2 pairs of boots, a go bag, a laundry bag, a weapon, an M16A4, serial number recorded against their name, the rifle they would carry for the next 13 weeks, and that they were responsible for until they turned it back in at week 12. They got their initial haircut. They got their initial uniform fitting. They got their initial smoke session, 15 minutes of bends and thrusts on the quarterdeck of the squad bay, while Master Sergeant Cole walked between them and screamed about what they had volunteered for. Pace didn't smoke them. Pace stood at the back of the squad bay with a clipboard, and she watched. She wrote down names. She wrote down faces. She wrote down which recruits locked their knees on the 3rd minute, which recruits started crying on the 5th, which recruits clenched their jaws and didn't make a sound. She wrote down Recruit Henson's name on the 5th minute. He was the kid who clenched his jaw and didn't make a sound. She underlined his name twice. She had been a drill instructor for 14 hours, and she had already identified the recruit who would, in week 11, break down on a crucible march and get her senior put on his back in the sand. That night, Pace stood second watch. Second watch on Parris Island runs from 2200 to 0200. You stand at the duty desk at the front of the squad bay. The lights are off except for one red bulb over the duty desk. The recruits are in their racks. Some of them are asleep. Most of them are not. The first night, none of them are asleep. They lie in their racks in their newly issued PT gear, and they stare at the ceiling, and they cry without making a sound. The first cry of the first night of Marine Corps recruit training is the quietest cry in the world. They cry with their mouths closed. They cry with their hands at their sides. They cry because they have figured out, in the last 6 hours, that the world they grew up in is not the world they are in anymore, and that the only way out is through. Pace sat at the duty desk, and she read. She had brought a book, a small book, a paperback. She kept it in the cargo pocket of her trousers, and she pulled it out at 22:05, and she opened it to a page she had dog-eared. The book was Marcus Aurelius. Meditations. The Hayes translation. She had been carrying it since her first deployment to Helmand in 2011. She read it on every second watch she ever stood as a drill instructor. 712 recruits passed through her platoons over the next 4 years. Not one of them ever saw the cover of that book. She kept it angled so the red bulb hit only the page and not the spine. She read for 1 hour and 40 minutes. At 23:45, a recruit got out of his rack. It was Recruit Henson. He walked down the center aisle of the squad bay in his PT gear and his shower shoes. He walked the way recruits are taught to walk in the squad bay at night, quiet, hands at his sides, eyes forward. He stopped at the duty desk. He stood at attention. He didn't say anything. He waited to be addressed. Pace closed her book. She put it in her cargo pocket. She looked up at him. She said, "Quiet, recruit. Speak." He said, "Ma'am, this recruit requests permission to use the head, ma'am." She said, "Granted. Return to the duty desk before returning to your rack." He said, "Aye, ma'am." He went to the head. He came back. He stood at the duty desk again. He stood at attention. He didn't move. She said, "Recruit. Something on your mind." He said, "Ma'am, no, ma'am." She said, "Recruit. Try again." He stood there for 11 seconds. She counted. She counted because she had learned, at some point in her 11 years in the Corps, that the difference between a Marine telling you the truth and a Marine telling you what you want to hear is about 10 seconds. If you can stay quiet for 10 seconds after the second question, you almost always get the truth. At 11 seconds, Recruit Henson said, "Ma'am, my brother." She said, "What about him?" He said, "Ma'am, he was a Marine. He was killed in San Jin in 2010. This recruit told his mother he would graduate. This recruit's mother has not been okay since 2010. This recruit does not know if he can do this. This recruit is asking the drill instructor. He stopped. He couldn't get the rest out. Pace let him stand there. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't tell him to spit it out. She didn't tell him to get back to his rack. She let him stand at attention at the duty desk at 23:53 on the first night of recruit training and not be able to finish his sentence. At 23:55, she said it for him. She said, "Recruit, you're asking the drill instructor if you're going to make it." He said, "Ma'am, yes, ma'am." She said, "Recruit, look at me." He looked at her. Recruits are not supposed to make eye contact with drill instructors. It is one of the first rules. You don't look at them. You look through them, past them, at a point on the wall behind them. You don't look at their face. Pace had just told him to. He looked at her face. He saw a gunnery sergeant in a campaign cover looking at him the way his grandmother had looked at him the morning he left. She said, "Recruit Henson, I'm going to tell you something one time. You're going to remember it. You're going to remember it on week 3 when you're on the obstacle course and you can't get over the wall. You're going to remember it on week 6 when you're in the gas chamber and you can't breathe. You're going to remember it on week 11 when you're on the crucible and you can't take another step. You ready?" He said, "Ma'am, yes, ma'am." She said, "Your brother walked further than this. So can you." She watched his face. She watched him take the sentence in. She watched it land. She said, "Return to your rack, recruit." He said, "Aye, ma'am." He walked back down the center aisle in his shower shoes, and he climbed into his rack, and he lay on his back, and he closed his eyes, and for the first time in 38 hours he slept. Pace pulled the book back out of her cargo pocket. She didn't open it. She held it in her lap for a minute. She put it back. She stood second watch until 0200. She wrote up the watch log. She handed off to Staff Sergeant Pereira at 0205. She went to the duty hut and she lay on the bunk in her camis. She didn't take off her boots. She never took off her boots in the duty hut for 13 weeks, and she slept for 3 hours and 40 minutes. At 0545, she was on the quarterdeck for reveille. Cole arrived at 0615. He was the senior drill instructor. The senior doesn't sleep in the duty hut. The senior goes home to his family. Cole drove home every night to a small house in Beaufort where he lived alone. His wife had filed for divorce in 2009. His daughter was a junior at the University of South Carolina. He lived with a golden retriever named Foxtrot. He arrived at the squad bay at 0615 every morning of every cycle for 12 weeks. He brought a thermos of black coffee from his own kitchen. He didn't drink the chow hall coffee. He walked into the squad bay at 0615 on day 2, and Pace was on the quarterdeck running the morning routine. The recruits were in 2 formations doing pivots. Left face, right face, about face. The kind of drill that looks like nothing and is everything. Pace was calling cadence in a voice that carried to the back of the squad bay without being loud. Cole stood in the doorway and watched her for 90 seconds. He watched recruit Henson. Henson was in 2nd squad, 3rd rank. He was executing every command a quarter beat before the rest of the platoon. Not early, sharp. Locked in. The way a recruit moves when he has decided, somewhere in the night between 0000 and 0545, that he is going to be a Marine. Cole had seen that look in recruits before. He had seen it 800 times. He had seen it in himself, in Camp Pendleton in 1992, on the 2nd morning of his own recruit training, when he had decided in the dark of the squad bay at 2340 on the first night that he was going to be a Marine no matter what. He knew the look. He knew what produced the look. He knew that something had happened on 2nd watch. He didn't ask. He walked past Pace without speaking and went into the senior's office and closed the door and drank his coffee and reviewed the cycle binder. He came back out at 0700 for chow formation. He took the platoon to chow. He took them to PT. He took them to classroom instruction on Marine Corps history. He took them to the quarterdeck for an hour of incentive training in the afternoon. He smoked them for 58 minutes. He screamed at them for 58 minutes. He worked them until 3 of them threw up and 4 of them quit on their feet and got back up. Pace stood at the back of the quarterdeck with her clipboard. She watched. She didn't smoke them. She didn't scream. She watched. She watched Cole. She watched the way he moved between recruits. She watched the way he targeted his volume. He wasn't screaming at the platoon. He was screaming at individual recruits, picking them out one at a time, getting in their faces for 8 to 12 seconds, and then moving to the next. She watched the way he never touched them. Drill instructors are not allowed to touch recruits. Cole had been a drill instructor for 4 cycles in the 90s, and he was on his 5th cycle now, 22 years later, and in all 5 cycles he had never touched a recruit. Pace watched his hands. His hands stayed at his sides or behind his back the entire 58 minutes. She watched recruit Henson. Henson got smoked for 9 seconds at minute 41. Cole stopped in front of him and screamed in his face for 9 seconds about the position of his elbows in the push-up. Henson didn't move. Henson didn't flinch. Henson held the push-up at the down position with his elbows in the position Cole was screaming about until Cole stopped screaming and moved on. Henson held it for an additional 11 seconds after Cole moved on. Then he pushed up. Then he went back down. Then he pushed up. He did the full set. Pace wrote 3 letters next to his name on her clipboard. The letters were GTG. Good. 2. Go. That night, she stood second watch again. 3 recruits got out of their racks that night to come to the duty desk. None of them was Henson. Henson slept through the night. The 3 who came to the desk came for 3 different reasons. One to ask about his mother, one to ask about whether quitting was the same as failing, one to ask if there was a way to send a letter to a girl back home before week 3. Pace gave each one a sentence. Not the same sentence. A different sentence for each one. The sentences took her about 90 seconds total to deliver across the 4-hour watch. She read Marcus Aurelius for 2 hours and 48 minutes. She slept 3 hours and 45 minutes in the duty hut. She was on the quarterdeck at 05:45. That was day 2. Day 3 through day 14 were the same shape. Pace stood second watch every night. Pace watched the platoon during the day. Pace executed every order Cole gave her without comment. Pace did not raise her voice once in the first 2 weeks. The recruits noticed. The recruits noticed by the end of week 1. By the end of week 2, the recruits had figured out, without anyone telling them, that there were 2 kinds of communication coming at them from the drill instructors. There was Master Sergeant Cole's communication, which was loud and constant and which they were required to respond to with maximum effort. And there was Gunnery Sergeant Pace's communication, which was quiet and rare and which they were required to respond to with maximum attention. They started leaning in. Drill instructors on Parris Island will tell you that the moment in a cycle when the platoon starts leaning in is the moment the cycle becomes a Marine Corps cycle. It usually happens in week 4, sometimes week 5. In Platoon 2049, it happened in week 2. It happened because of Pace. Cole noticed. He didn't say anything. He noticed by adjusting his own pattern. He started cutting his smoke sessions shorter. He started using fewer words during incentive training. He started letting silences land. He didn't do it consciously. He did it because he was a 22-year Marine and he was watching a junior drill instructor do something he hadn't seen done in 5 cycles of drill instructor duty. And his instinct as a senior Marine was to adjust to what was working. He still didn't speak to her outside of duty. He gave her orders. She executed them. She gave him status reports at the end of each day. He acknowledged them. They did not have a single conversation in the first 3 weeks of the cycle that was not directly about the platoon. In week 3, the platoon went to the rifle range. Edson Range. 2 weeks of marksmanship training. Week 1, grass week. The recruits sit in the grass behind the firing line and they practice positions. Standing, kneeling, sitting, prone. They dry fire. They learn breathing. They learn trigger control. They learn the natural respiratory pause. They learn to call their shots. Week 2, firing week. They put rounds on paper at 200, 300, and 500 yards. They qualify on Friday. The qualification score determines whether they graduate as marksmen, sharpshooters, or experts. Or, if they fail, whether they graduate at all. You cannot graduate from Marine Corps recruit training without qualifying on the rifle. Cole was a good rifle coach. Cole was not a great rifle coach. Pace was a distinguished rifleman. A distinguished rifleman is a Marine who has earned, over the course of multiple competitive matches at the regional and national level, enough points to be authorized to wear the Distinguished Rifleman badge on his or her dress uniform. There are about 2,000 distinguished riflemen in the United States Marine Corps at any given time, out of about 180,000 Marines. Pace had earned her badge in 2012 at the Marine Corps Championships at Quantico. She had shot a 487 out of 500 at 600 yards in the prone position with iron sights. She knew the rifle. In week 1 of rifle training, grass week, Cole ran the instruction. He stood in front of the platoon and he taught the positions the way they had been taught at Edson Range for 60 years. He walked between recruits and he corrected their positions. He used the standard corrections. Elbow under the rifle. Cheek weld tight. Trigger finger pad, not joint. Breathing. In, out. Hold, squeeze. He did it well. He did it the way it had been done for him in 1992. Pace walked between recruits behind him. She didn't correct positions out loud. She didn't override Cole. She walked between the recruits in the grass, and she knelt down next to one recruit at a time, and she put her hand on the recruit's hand or the recruit's elbow or the recruit's shoulder, and she adjusted it by outfire. Standing position. 10 rounds. The recruits stepped up to the firing line in pairs. One shooter, one coach. The platoon coaches were the drill instructors and a rotation of range coaches from the Edson Range staff. Cole took first relay. Pace took second relay. In first relay, Cole's recruits shot an average of 31 out of 50 in the standing position. In second relay, Pace's recruits shot an average of 42 out of 50 in the standing position. 11 points. 11 points is not a small number on the 200-yard line in the standing position. 11 points is a different platoon. The range coaches noticed. The Edson Range chief, a master gunnery sergeant named Kowalski, 28 years in, the senior enlisted rifle coach on the East Coast, walked down to the second relay during the third string and watched Pace coach for 10 minutes. He watched her kneel next to recruit Acosta and adjust the angle of his support arm by 2 degrees. He watched her tap recruit Henson on the back of the right shoulder and watch Henson exhale and reset his cheek weld. He watched her do this with 7 different recruits in 10 minutes, without saying more than 4 words to any of them, while the recruits put rounds on paper. Kowalski walked back up the firing line to where Cole was watching first relay reset their positions. Kowalski said, "Cole." Cole said, "Master Guns." Kowalski said, "Your junior is a distinguished rifleman." Cole said, "I'm aware." Kowalski said, "She's coaching your second relay 11 points better than you're coaching your first." Cole said, "I'm aware." Kowalski said, "You want her to take first relay tomorrow?" Cole was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he said, "Yes, Master Guns. I do." Kowalski nodded. He walked back down the firing line. He walked past Pace without speaking to her. He walked back to the range tower and he sat down with his coffee. That night in the senior's office at 2100, Cole said to Pace, for the first time in 3 weeks, a sentence that was not an order. He said, "Gunny, You're taking first relay tomorrow. You're running coaching for the rest of the week. I'll run the line. She said, "Aye, Master Sergeant." He said, "Distinguished Rifleman." She said, "Aye, Master Sergeant." He said, "Quantico, 2012." She said, "Aye, Master Sergeant." He looked at her across the desk. He said, 487 at 600. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He had read her jacket. She had known, since the breakfast on July 28th, that he hadn't read her jacket. She had known it because of the sentence he had said at the breakfast, "Find your desk," which was a sentence you couldn't say to a Marine whose jacket you had read. He had read it now. She didn't ask when he had read it. She didn't ask why. She just stood there in the senior's office at 2104, and she waited for him to dismiss her. He said, "Dismissed." She said, "Aye, Master Sergeant." She left. That cycle, Platoon 2049, qualified 89% expert on the rifle range. The battalion average that quarter was 68% expert. Cole accepted the platoon's range trophy at the Friday graduation from rifle qualification. He accepted it without looking at Pace. But that night, in the senior's office, alone, after Pace had gone to stand second watch, Cole pulled a piece of notebook paper out of his desk drawer and he wrote 2 words on it in pencil. He wrote, "Distinguished Rifleman." He folded the paper twice. He put it in the inside band of his campaign cover, behind the leather sweatband, where it would stay for the next 2 years and 3 months, and where it would still be folded when he held the cover out to her on a parade deck in December of 2016. The rest of Cycle 1 happened the way Marine Corps cycles happen when something is working. Days collapsed into weeks. Weeks collapsed into a single long week. The recruits stopped being 78 individual 18-year-olds and started being a platoon. They started moving as one body. They started thinking as one mind. They started, by week 6, referring to themselves in the first-person plural. We did the obstacle course. We qualified expert. We didn't quit. Cole ran the cycle the way he had run 4 cycles before it. He arrived at 0615. He left at 2200. He drove home to the small house in Beaufort and walked the golden retriever and slept 5 hours and came back. He did this 6 days a week. On Sundays, the recruits had reduced training. He came in at 0900 and left at 1600. Pace ran second watch, 84 nights, 84 second watches, 2200 to 0200. She read Marcus Aurelius for somewhere between 50 and 190 minutes of every watch, depending on how many recruits came to the desk. By the end of the cycle, she had read the entire book 6 times. The spine on the paperback had cracked. The pages were soft from her fingers. The dog ear on Book 5, Chapter 1 had been folded and unfolded so many times that the corner had come off. She didn't replace the book. She also did not stop reading it. The book she carried in her cargo pocket for 8 cycles of drill instructor duty was the same book. She still has it. It sits on her desk at the drill instructor school today, in a small wooden box that her father, Master Sergeant Thomas Pace, USMC retired, San, 1968, built her for her promotion to Sergeant Major in 2021. But we're not there yet. We're still in Cycle 1. Week 11 of Cycle 1 was the Crucible. Cycle 1's Crucible was different from Cycle 5's Crucible. Cycle 1's Crucible had no sandpit incident. Cycle 1's Crucible was, by Parris Island standards, uneventful. 78 recruits started the Crucible. 73 finished it. 5 were dropped for medical issues, 2 stress fractures, 1 heat exhaustion, 1 severe dehydration, 1 panic episode at the gas chamber recovery station. None of the 5 was recruit Henson. Henson finished the Crucible in the middle of the platoon. His left tibia was not yet stress fractured. The stress fracture would happen in Cycle 5. In Cycle 1, Henson was, to all outward appearances, a normal recruit. Above average on rifle. Average on PT, quiet. Locked in. The Eagle Globe and Anchor ceremony at the end of the Crucible, the moment a recruit officially becomes a Marine, was held at sunrise on the parade deck behind the Crucible course. Cole pinned the EGA on each recruit personally. Pace stood 3 steps behind him and to his left. She did not pin EGAs. The senior pins EGAs. The junior watches. When Cole pinned the EGA on Recruit Henson, at this point still Recruit Henson, he would not be addressed as Marine Henson until graduation 10 days later. Cole said 2 words. He said, "Welcome aboard." He said it to every recruit. Same 2 words. 73 times. Henson, when Cole stepped to the next recruit, turned his head a 1/4 inch to the left and made eye contact with Gunnery Sergeant Pace. Pace did not move. Pace did not nod. Pace did not change her expression. But Henson, when he told me about this moment at the Waffle House in Oceanside 10 years later, said, "Master Gunner." She looked at me. She didn't move, and she didn't nod, and she didn't change her face. But she looked at me, and I knew what she was saying. She was saying, "Your brother walked further than this. You did too. Now go." Henson was a Marine. The platoon graduated 10 days later. Family Day was on a Thursday. Graduation was on a Friday. Pace's parents drove down from Toledo, Ohio. 12 hours, 2 days, 1 stop in Charleston, West Virginia. Master Sergeant Thomas Pace, USMC retired, 68 years old, with a bad hip from a piece of shrapnel he had taken at Key, San in 1968, and a service-connected hearing loss that meant his wife had to repeat herself twice for every sentence. Her mother, Maria Pace, née Aquino, born in Olongapo in 1949, came to the United States in 1972 as the bride of a young Marine she had met at Subic Bay. 65 years old, 3 feet 11 inches of woman who had raised 5 children on a master sergeant's pension and who had cried for 2 days when her daughter joined the Marines and who had not cried since. They sat in row 42 of the parade deck bleachers. Graduation parade started at 0900. The platoon marched on. The battalion commander spoke. The sergeant major spoke. The new Marines passed in review. Cole led platoon 2049 across the parade deck. Pace marched at her position, 3 steps behind, 1 step to the left of the senior. The drill instructor's marching position when the platoon is in formation. She marched past row 42 and she did not look at her parents. Her father saluted her from his seat. He was 68 years old, and he was a retired master sergeant, and he was sitting in a folding chair on a parade deck on Parris Island, and he raised his right hand, and he saluted his daughter as she marched past in a campaign cover. She did not return the salute. She was on duty. She would have returned the salute at any other moment, in any other place. She would have crossed a room to return it. She would have walked across the parade deck after the ceremony and embraced him and let her mother cry on her shoulder for the first time in 11 years. But during the pass and review of her first platoon as a drill instructor on the male side of Parris Island, she did not return her father's salute. Because the drill instructor marching past a reviewing stand does not break formation for anyone, not the commandant, not the president, not her own father in row 42. Her father knew that. He held the salute through her entire pass. After the parade was dismissed and the new Marines were released to their families, Pace walked off the parade deck in the direction of the senior's office to begin the closeout paperwork for the cycle. She would have closeout paperwork from 1600 Friday until about 2200 Friday. She would have 96 hours of leave starting Saturday morning. Her parents would stay in a Hampton Inn in Beaufort for Saturday and Sunday. She would have dinner with them Saturday night and brunch with them Sunday morning. They would drive back to Toledo Sunday afternoon. She would not return her father's salute until Saturday night. in the parking lot of a seafood restaurant on Bay Street in Beaufort, when she walked up to his car as he was opening the door for her mother, and she stopped 6 feet from him, and she came to attention, and she rendered him a salute that she held for 4 seconds. He returned it. He said, "Gunnery Sergeant." She said, "Master Sergeant." He said, "I'm proud of you." She said, "Thank you, Master Sergeant." He said, "Get in the car. Your mother's hungry." That was her first cycle. Cycle 2 started 6 days later. Platoon 2050. 76 recruits inbound. Same shape, same rhythm, same senior, same junior. Cole gave Pace second watch every night for 14 consecutive nights. He did not stop giving her second watch. The schedule never changed. For 3 more cycles, 2, 3, and 4. Pace stood second watch every night of every cycle. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for a different rotation. She didn't even bring it up. Cycle 2 qualified 72 Marines. Cycle 3 qualified 74. Cycle 4 qualified 70. The battalion average across those 3 cycles was 63. Platoon 2049 through 2052 graduated 289 Marines under Cole and Pace as a senior-junior pair. The battalion average for the same period was 252. That's 37 more Marines. 37 Marines who, on the battalion average, would not have made it to the EGA ceremony. 37 young men who got to call their mothers and tell them they were Marines because they had been assigned to Platoon 2049, 2050, 2051, or 2052. Cole accepted the credit for all 37. He accepted it the way senior drill instructors accept credit. Quietly, without comment. He stood at the graduation parade for each cycle and shook the hands of the families of the recruits who had been pinned. He answered the same question 70 times a cycle. "Yes, ma'am. Your son is a Marine." "Yes, sir. Your boy did good." "Yes, ma'am. He made it." Pace stood 3 steps behind him. She shook hands when families crossed in front of her. She answered questions when they were directed at her. She said, "Yes, ma'am. Your son is a Marine." The families looked at her in her campaign cover with a kind of expression that, in the summer of 2014, was still unusual on the male side of Parris Island. Some of them looked at her with confusion. Some of them looked at her with something that wasn't quite respect and wasn't quite curiosity. A few of them, the ones whose sons had told them, in letters home that week, about the gunnery sergeant who never raised her voice, looked at her with something close to gratitude. The mother of Recruit Acosta, the El Paso kid, walked up to Pace at the Cycle 3 graduation. She did not speak English. She spoke to Pace in Spanish. She said, "Sergeant, my son writes me about you. He says you saved him in the 3rd week. He says he was going to quit. He says you told him something at a desk in the middle of the night, and he didn't quit. Sergeant, I don't know what you told him. I don't need to know. I am his mother. I am telling you thank you." Pace's Spanish was bad. Her Spanish was bad because she had grown up speaking English and Tagalog at home, not Spanish. But she understood about 80% of what Mrs. Acosta said to her. She replied in English. She said, "Ma'am, your son did the work. I just stood the watch." Mrs. Acosta cried. Pace did not cry. Pace, in the 4 years she was a drill instructor on Parris Island, did not cry once on duty. She cried 4 times off duty. She cried once when her father called her in November of 2015 and told her that her mother had been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. She cried once in March of 2016 when her mother called and told her the cancer was in remission. She cried once in July of 2016 when she found out she had been selected for promotion to Master Sergeant below the zone, a promotion that would normally have come a year later. And she cried once on a Saturday morning in October of 2016 in a booth at a Waffle House on Boundary Street in Beaufort, across the table from Master Sergeant Brennan Cole, When he told her something I'll tell you about when we get there. But we're not there yet. We're in Cycle 3. We're on the rifle range. Edson Range, spring of 2015. Cycle 3 was the cycle that broke the battalion rifle qualification record. 94% expert. The previous record was 89, which Pace had also helped set in Cycle 1, although that record was officially attributed to Cole as senior. Cycle 3's record was attributed to Cole again. The trophy was presented to Cole at the battalion awards formation. Cole carried the trophy off the parade deck and into the senior's office and set it on his desk. He set it on his desk facing Pace's card table. He didn't say anything about it. It sat on his desk facing her for the rest of Cycle 3 and all of Cycle 4. She looked at it every day. She didn't say anything about it either. The reason Cycle 3 broke the record was not Cole. The reason was that Pace, between Cycles 2 and 3, had personally rebuilt the platoon's approach to Battle Sight Zero, BZO, the procedure by which a Marine's rifle is calibrated to his eye and his body and his shooting position. The standard Marine Corps BZO procedure at Edson Range in 2015 was fire 3 rounds at 25 yards. Adjust sights. Fire 3 more. Adjust sights. Fire 3 more. Confirm. Move to 200 yards. Pace had figured out, during her 2 combat deployments to Helmand, that the standard BZO procedure was good enough for combat, but not good enough for competition. She had figured out that the difference between a recruit qualifying as a sharpshooter and a recruit qualifying as an expert was usually about 4 clicks of windage, and that the standard BZO procedure didn't reliably catch those 4 clicks on a new shooter who was still settling into his position. She rewrote the BZO procedure for Platoon 2051. She rewrote it on a piece of notebook paper at the duty desk during second watch in week 2 of Cycle 3. She wrote it in pencil. She wrote it as a 5-step process. She wrote it to take an extra 11 minutes per recruit on day 1 of grass week. She brought it to Cole on Monday of week 3. She said, "Master Sergeant, request permission to modify the BZO procedure for grass week." "Sir," he said, "show me." She showed him. He read it. He read it twice. He picked up a pencil and he made 2 changes. One a clarification of the language in Step 3, one a reordering of Steps 4 and 5. He handed it back to her. He said, "Run it." She said, "Aye, Master Sergeant." She ran it. 94% expert. The Edson Range Chief, Kowalski, the Master Gunnery Sergeant, walked down to the firing line on qualification Friday and stood behind the platoon for the entire morning. He didn't speak to Pace. He didn't speak to Cole. He watched. After qualification, he walked up to Cole at the tower and said 2 sentences. He said, "Cole, whatever your junior is doing, keep doing it." Cole said, "Aye, Master Guns." Kowalski said, "And put her in for a Navy achievement." Cole said, "Aye, Master Guns." He did not put her in for a Navy achievement. He didn't put her in because he was angry. He didn't put her in because he was jealous. He didn't put her in because he was withholding. He didn't put her in because, he told me himself, 10 years later, at a different Waffle House, on a different Saturday morning. He didn't know how. He had never written an award citation for a junior who was outperforming him. He had only written citations for juniors who were learning from him. He didn't know how to write a citation that said, "My junior is better than me, and my platoon is better because of her, and the right thing for the Marine Corps is to formally recognize that." He didn't know the words. He didn't know the format. He was too proud to ask. He sat at his desk at 2100 on the night of qualification Friday of Cycle 3. He opened a blank Navy Achievement Medal citation template on his computer. He looked at the empty fields. He stared at them for 40 minutes. He typed the words, "Gunnery Sergeant Devin E. Pace," in the first field. He stared at the second field for another 40 minutes. He closed the document without saving it. He went home. He walked the golden retriever. He went to bed. He did not write the citation. That was cycle 3. Cycle 4 started 10 days later. Cycle 4 was the cycle in which Cole started to break. He did not break visibly. He did not break in a way that any of his recruits would have noticed. He showed up at 0615. He ran the platoon. He smoked them. He coached them. He took them through PT and rifle and the obstacle course and gas chamber and bayonet training and combat conditioning and all the other things a cycle is made of. He did his job, but he started, in cycle 4, to come into the senior's office at 0545 instead of 0615. He started, in cycle 4, to stay until 2230 instead of 2200. He started, in cycle 4, to drink his thermos of black coffee before he got to the squad bay, driving from Beaufort with the thermos open on the passenger seat, and to refill it at the chow hall at 0700. He started, in cycle 4, to read. He had not been a reader for 22 years in the Marine Corps. He had read what he had to read for school. He had read the citations he wrote and the citations he received. He had read the cycle binders and the duty rosters and the recruit jackets. He did not read books. In cycle 4, he started reading. He started with a book he found on Pace's card table on a Tuesday morning in week 1. She had left the book, Marcus Aurelius, Hay's translation, the same paperback she had been carrying for 2 years, on the corner of her desk while she went to the chow hall to bring back coffee for the duty hut. Cole walked into the office at 0545. He saw the book. He picked it up. He looked at the cover. He opened it. He read the first page. He read the first 10 pages. He put the book back exactly where it had been on her desk. That afternoon, on his lunch hour, he drove off base to a bookstore in Beaufort called Macintosh Books on Bay Street. He asked the clerk for a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, the Hayes translation. The clerk found it. Cole bought it. He paid cash. He kept the receipt in his wallet for 4 years. He started reading it that night. He read it at 22:30, after he got home from the squad bay, in the small living room of his small house in Beaufort, with the golden retriever asleep on the rug at his feet. He read 3 or 4 pages a night. He didn't understand all of it. He understood some of it. The parts he understood, he underlined in pencil. He didn't show the book to anyone. He didn't tell anyone he was reading it. He read it for 43 nights. He finished it in week 7 of cycle 4. He started it again the next night. He read it again from the beginning. He underlined different passages on the second read. Pace never knew, during cycles 4 through 8, that Master Sergeant Brennan Cole was reading the same book she was. He never told her. She did not find out until 3 years after he retired, when his daughter, Anna Cole, by then an assistant district attorney in Columbia, South Carolina, sent Pace a small package in the mail with a note that said, "Sergeant Major, this was on my father's nightstand when he died. He had it dog-eared on the page that I think he wanted you to have. I don't know what it means." He never explained. I think you might. But we're not there yet either. We're still in cycle 4. Cole is reading Marcus Aurelius at home. Pace is reading the same book at the duty desk during second watch. They are both, without knowing they are both, going through the same text in the same months in the same town on the same base. In week 11 of cycle 4, the platoon went on the crucible. Cycle 4's crucible was uneventful. 70 recruits started. 70 finished. No injuries. No incidents. No sandpit. The sandpit came in cycle 5. Cycle 5, October of 2014. Cycle 5 is where we have to slow down. Cycle 5 is where the 4 years of buildup compresses into 11 minutes of decision. Cycle 5 is where the sentence Cole said at the breakfast on July 28, 2014, "Find your desk," finally arrived at the moment it had been traveling toward. Platoon 2053. 76 recruits inbound on August 4th, 2014. Same senior, same junior. Recruit Henson was not in Platoon 2053. Recruit Henson was a different recruit. The Henson in our story, the one who went down in the sand pit, was Recruit Marcus Henson of Detroit, Michigan, who had inbound on August 4th, 2014, with Platoon 2053. I told you earlier that Henson had been in Pace's first platoon. That was a mistake. I'm correcting it now. Henson was in Cycle 5. Henson was the recruit who came to the duty desk on the first night of Cycle 5 and told Pace about his brother. Henson was the recruit Pace told, "Your brother walked further than this. So can you." At the duty desk at 23:55 on August 4th, 2014. I'm telling you this because I want you to know I'm telling you the story right. I'm not embellishing. I'm not making it up. The story is the story. When I get something wrong, I correct it. Cycle 5 was Henson. Cycle 5 was the sand pit. Cycle 5 was the 11 minutes that rewrote the male side of Parris Island. And Cycle 5 was about to start. Cycle 5 inbound. August 4th, 2014. 1400. The yellow buses from Charleston pulled up to the receiving building of 2nd Recruit Training Battalion. 76 recruits stepped off. They stood on the yellow footprints. They lost the world they had known. Recruit Marcus Henson was the 43rd recruit off the bus. He was 5'7", 142 pounds. Detroit, Michigan. 19 years old. 3 months out of high school. He had played junior varsity football for 2 years and then quit because his older brother had been killed in San Jin in 2010 and his mother had stopped getting out of bed and he had needed to get a job at a Meijer to keep the lights on. He had worked at the Meijer for 16 months. He had saved $900. He had walked into the Marine Corps recruiting station on 8 Mile Road on his 18th birthday with his birth certificate in a manila envelope. His brother's name was Jerome Henson. Sergeant Jerome Henson, USMC, 3rd Battalion 5th Marines. Killed in action November 14, 2010, in the Sanjin Valley, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Sergeant Henson had been 23 years old. He had been on his 3rd deployment. He had a daughter who was 18 months old at the time he was killed. The daughter, Marcus's niece, was 4 years old when Marcus stepped off the bus at Parris Island. She was being raised by her mother in a duplex in Pontiac. Marcus had not seen her in 8 months because his shifts at the Meijer didn't line up with the drive to Pontiac. He stepped off the bus. He stood on the yellow footprints. Gunnery Sergeant Pace was at the end of the yellow footprints in her campaign cover. She looked at him. She didn't know yet, on August 4th, that Recruit Henson was the recruit she would be telling, 11 weeks and 3 days later, in a sand pit at the Crucible, to get up because his brother had walked further than this. She didn't know, but she watched him. She watched him on the yellow footprints, and she watched him through initial gear issue, and she watched him through the initial haircut, and she watched him through the first smoke session on the quarterdeck. He was the 7th recruit in 3rd Squad. He held his push-ups when Cole screamed at him about his elbows in the 4th minute. He held his bends and thrusts through the 8th minute when 2 recruits to his left started vomiting. He did not lock his knees. He did not cry. He clenched his jaw, and he didn't make a sound. Pace wrote his name on her clipboard. She underlined it twice. That night she stood second watch. At 23:45, a recruit got out of his rack and walked to the duty desk. It was Recruit Henson. He stood at attention at the duty desk in his PT gear and his shower shoes. He requested permission to use the head. She granted it. He used the head. He came back. He stood at the duty desk again. He didn't move. She let him stand there for 11 seconds. She said, "Recruit, something on your mind?" He said, "Ma'am, my brother." He told her about Jerome. He told her about his mother. He told her about the promise. He told her, at 23:55 on the first night of recruit training, that he didn't know if he could do this. He stood at the duty desk in his shower shoes, and he asked the drill instructor a question that recruits are not supposed to ask drill instructors. She told him, "Your brother walked further than this. So can you?" He went back to his rack. He slept. That was the first night. The first night happened in Cycle 5 exactly the way I described it happening in Cycle 1. The difference is that in Cycle 5, the recruit on the other side of the desk was Henson, and the sentence Pace gave him, "Your brother walked further than this," was the sentence she would say to him again 11 weeks later in the sand pit. The first time she said it on a hunch. She said it because she had read his face on the yellow footprints and she had figured out, in about 40 seconds, who he was and what he was carrying. The second time she said it, in the sand pit, she said it because she had been carrying the sentence for 11 weeks waiting for the moment when he would need it again. She had figured out, by week 1, that Henson was a recruit who would need the sentence twice. She was right. But before we get to the sand pit, we have to go through the 11 weeks. Weeks 1 through 10 of Cycle 5 were, by Parris Island standards, a normal cycle. The platoon went through the standard training schedule. Initial drill, initial PT, Marine Corps history, customs and courtesies, the obstacle course, the confidence course, pugil sticks, bayonet training, combat conditioning, rappel tower, gas chamber, Edson range, rifle qualification, combat marksmanship, field week, crucible. Cole ran the cycle. Pace stood the watches. The platoon learned, in the standard arc, the lessons it had to learn. By week 6, they were leaning into Pace when she spoke. By week 8, they were leaning into Cole. By week 10, they were a platoon. Henson, across the first 10 weeks, did everything a recruit is supposed to do. He qualified expert on the rifle range. He passed the gas chamber on his first cycle through. He completed the obstacle course in the top quarter of the platoon. He scored a 278 on his initial PFT, 3 points off a perfect 300. He was, by every measurable standard the Marine Corps has, a high-performing recruit. He was also, without telling anyone, running on a stress fracture in his left tibia from week 6. The stress fracture happened during combat conditioning on a Wednesday afternoon in week 6. The platoon had been doing fireman carries up a sand berm for 40 minutes. Henson had carried a recruit named Recruit Diallo, 6'1", 190 pounds, the heaviest recruit in the platoon, up the berm 3 times. On the third carry, he felt something in his left shin. Not a snap, a click, a small, deep, internal click, the way a kitchen drawer clicks when it slides into its rail. He finished the carry. He put Diallo down. He walked back down the berm, and he got in line for his next carry. He did not tell anyone. He should have told someone. If he had told Pace at 2300 that night during second watch, she would have walked him to medical at 0500, and he would have been put in a soft cast and held back from his platoon and recycled into a later cycle to graduate after his shin healed. He would have graduated. He would have been a Marine. He would have done all of it 3 months later than the kids he started with. He did not tell Pace. He did not tell Pace because the recycle would have meant another 3 months on Parris Island. Another 3 months of his mother in the duplex in Detroit. Another 3 months of her not getting out of bed. He had calculated, at 2300 on the night of the click, that he could last 5 more weeks on the leg. He had calculated that if he could last 5 more weeks, he would graduate with his platoon. He would put on the dress blues and ride home to Detroit on a Greyhound and walk into the duplex with the EGA on his collar, and his mother would get out of bed. He calculated wrong by 3 days. The leg held for 5 weeks and 4 days. It broke on the crucible. The crucible is the final test of Marine Corps recruit training. 54 hours, 48 miles of marching, 2 MREs total for the whole event. 4 hours of sleep total for the whole event. Continuous tactical problems, obstacle courses, combat scenarios, casualty evacuations, leadership reaction problems. The Crucible ends with a 9-mile ruck march back to the parade deck and the Eagle Globe and Anchor ceremony at sunrise on the third day. Platoon 2053 started the Crucible at 0200 on Tuesday, October 15, 2014. The first day went the way first days of the Crucible go. The platoon marched. They ran tactical problems. They ate 1 MRE. They slept 90 minutes between 0300 and 0430 on Wednesday morning. They marched some more. Henson's leg held. The second day was harder. The platoon was on hour 30 by 0800 Wednesday. They ran the obstacle course at hour 34. They ran the bayonet assault course at hour 38. They marched 4 miles back to the bivouac site at hour 42. They ate the second MRE at hour 43. They slept 90 minutes between hour 45 and hour 46 and a half. Henson's leg held. At 0300 on Thursday, hour 49, the platoon started the final 9-mile ruck march back to the parade deck. 62 pounds of pack and weapon. The march route went through the back trails of the Crucible course, across 2 sand berms, through a wooded area, and out onto the access road that runs along the perimeter of the recruit training area. The march was supposed to take 3.5 hours. The platoon was supposed to arrive at the parade deck at 0630 for the EGA ceremony at sunrise. At mile 6 of the march, hour 52 of the Crucible, 0500 on Thursday morning, Henson's leg broke. It didn't break the way a leg breaks in a car accident. It broke the way a stress fracture breaks when a stress fracture has been ignored for 5 weeks and 4 days. The bone, already cracked along about 40% of its cross-section, completed the crack across the remaining 60% in 1 step. Henson took a step with his left foot, and the bone gave. He felt it. He knew immediately what it was. He had known for 5 weeks and 4 days that this was a possibility. He had calculated. He had made his peace with the possibility. He didn't go down right away. He took 3 more steps on the broken bone. On the 4th step, he went down. He went down in a sand pit at the edge of the access road. The sand pit was a low spot in the trail where rainwater had washed sand off the berm and pulled it into a soft depression about 10 feet across. He landed on his hands and his knees. His pack pushed his head forward into the sand. He held himself up on his hands for about 4 seconds. Then his arms gave, and he went face down in the sand. The platoon kept marching for about 6 seconds before anyone noticed. The recruit behind him, Recruit Acosta, the El Paso kid from Cycle 3, who had been recycled forward into Cycle 5 after a hand injury in his original cycle, stopped. Acosta said, "Henson, get up." Henson didn't get up. Acosta said it louder. "Henson, get up." Henson didn't move. The platoon stopped. Master Sergeant Cole, who had been at the front of the platoon, turned around and walked back down the column. He had been awake for 40 hours. He had eaten 2 MREs in 2 days. He had drunk about 1.5 gallons of water and about 12 cups of coffee. He had been on his feet for the entire 52 hours of the Crucible. He had not sat down once. He had not slept more than 90 minutes. He was, by every measure that matters, operating on the kind of fatigue that strips a Marine down to his factory settings. His factory settings, when he reached Recruit Henson in the sand pit at 050 for on Thursday, October 17, 2014, were not the settings he wanted them to be. He stood over Henson. He said, "Recruit, on your feet." Henson didn't move. Cole said, louder, "Recruit, on your feet." Henson didn't move. Cole started screaming. He screamed at Henson the way drill instructors scream when they have run out of other tools. He screamed about the platoon waiting on him. He screamed about the EGA ceremony at sunrise. He screamed about Henson's mother and Henson's brother and Henson's promise. He screamed for 90 seconds straight without taking a breath. He bent down at the waist, and he put his face 6 inches from Henson's face, and he screamed into the sand. Henson didn't move. Cole straightened up. He took 3 steps back. He looked at the platoon. The platoon was standing in formation, watching their senior drill instructor scream at a recruit in a sand pit at 05:06 in the morning. Cole looked at them. He saw, on the faces of 60 recruits, a thing he had never seen before in his 5 cycles of drill instructor duty. He saw doubt. He saw, on the faces of 60 recruits, the first stage of the platoon realizing that their senior drill instructor was about to lose control. Cole knew the look. He had seen it on the faces of his own squad in Mogadishu in 1993 when his squad leader had lost control of a checkpoint and the squad had started, for 90 seconds, to make their own decisions about what to do. Cole had been 21 years old. He had been the assistant squad leader. He had stepped forward and taken the checkpoint from his squad leader and held it until the squad leader had recovered. The squad leader had thanked him in private that night. The squad leader had not been the same after. Cole was the squad leader now. Cole was losing the checkpoint. He didn't know how to recover. He had been operating on factory settings for 90 seconds, and the factory settings were not working. He bent down again. He screamed louder. He screamed for another 4 minutes. The volume of his voice went up, and his control of his words went down. He was no longer saying sentences. He was saying fragments. He was saying, "Get up," and "your mother," and "your brother," and "Marine," and "sand," and "now." He started to spit. He didn't mean to spit. Spit happens when you scream from your throat instead of your diaphragm for long enough. Cole had been screaming from his throat for about 6 minutes. The spit landed on Henson's face. Henson didn't move. At minute 8, Cole stepped back from Henson. He turned in a circle. He looked at the platoon again. The doubt on their faces had become something worse. The doubt had become decision. 60 recruits, at 05:12 on Thursday, October 17, 2014, had decided that their senior drill instructor was no longer in control of the situation. Cole bent down a 3rd time. He started screaming again. It was at this moment, minute 9 of Cole screaming at Henson, that Pace started walking. Pace had been at the back of the platoon. She had been at the position of the junior drill instructor during the march, 3 steps behind the last recruit, watching for stragglers, watching for fallouts. She had watched Henson's gait for the last 2 miles. She had figured out, somewhere around mile 5, that something was wrong with his left leg. She had been about to call him out of formation at the next halt when his leg gave out, and he went down in the sand pit. She had watched Cole walk back from the front of the platoon. She had watched Cole start screaming. She had watched for 9 minutes. She had not moved for 9 minutes because she was the junior drill instructor and the senior drill instructor was handling the situation, and you do not interrupt your senior in front of recruits unless the senior has lost control of the situation. For 8 minutes, Cole had been handling the situation badly, but he had been handling it. At minute 9, when she saw the spit and she saw the decision land on the platoon's faces, she made her own decision. She started walking. She walked from the back of the platoon to the sand pit at her normal walking speed. She didn't run. She didn't double time. She walked. It took her about 35 seconds to cover the distance. The platoon watched her walk. Cole, still bent over Henson, still screaming, did not see her until she was about 4 steps behind him. She stopped 4 steps behind him. She said it quiet. She said it at the volume she used on second watch. She said it the way you'd talk to a horse that's about to bolt. She said, "Master Sergeant." Cole heard her. He stopped screaming for about a second and a half. He didn't turn around. He went back to screaming. She took 2 more steps. She was now directly behind him. She put her right hand on his right shoulder. Light, the way you'd touch a horse. She did not grip. She did not pull. She put the flat of her palm on his trapezius muscle just above the collar of his cami blouse. She said, "Master Sergeant, step back. I've got him." Cole turned around. He turned around fast, faster than she had expected. He had been bent over and her hand had been on his shoulder, and he came up out of the bend with a kind of momentum that was about 40% intentional and 60% the physics of a 240-pound man rotating from a flexed position. His left elbow came up. His right shoulder came around. His face came around. His face, when it came around, was not the face of Master Sergeant Brennan Cole. It was the face of a man who had been on his factory settings for 90 seconds too long. His hands came up. He didn't decide to put his hands on her. He didn't make a decision. He came out of the bend with momentum, and his hands came up with the momentum, and he put both palms flat on her plate carrier, and he drove her back 3 steps. That was the shove. The shove happened at 05:14 on Thursday, October 17th, 2014. The 60 recruits of Platoon 2053 watched it happen. Pace did not stumble. Pace did not yell. Pace did not reach for a radio. Pace had been training MCMAP Brown Belt for 11 years, and one of the things they teach you at Brown Belt is what to do when a senior Marine puts his hands on you in the field. What you do is, you don't escalate. You de-escalate. You de-escalate by removing the senior Marine's center of gravity from his control as quickly and as cleanly as possible, in a way that does not injure him, in a way that ends the situation in under 5 seconds. She stepped inside the arc of his arms. She hooked the outside of his right ankle with the inside edge of her boot. She drove her left hand up under his chin, not into his throat, into his chin, palm open, the heel of her hand against the point of his jaw. She dropped him. For seconds, he hit the sand. His campaign cover came off mid-fall. The Smoky Bear, 22 years and 7 months of sweat ring on the inside band. It rolled into the pit and stopped against Recruit Henson's boot. The air came out of Cole in one sound. Half cough, half nothing. He hit the sand with his shoulder blades flat. The back of his skull was a 1/4 inch from a railroad tie that marked the edge of the pit. He didn't move. Pace stood over him. She looked down at him once. She said it quiet. "Get up, Marine. Recruit needs you upright." She used the word Marine, not Master Sergeant. She used it on purpose. She used it because Master Sergeant was the rank that had been screaming in a sand pit for 9 minutes. Marine was the man underneath the rank. She was talking to the man. He got up. He rolled to his side. He put one hand in the sand. He got to a knee. He reached for the cover, and Recruit Henson, who had not moved for 10 minutes, picked it up off the sand and held it out to him in both hands. Henson had moved. Henson, who hadn't moved for 10 minutes of Cole screaming, who hadn't moved when Cole spat on him, who hadn't moved when the platoon's faces decided their senior had lost it, moved when his senior went down in the sand. Henson picked up the cover. Henson held it out. Henson, with a broken left tibia in a soft sand pit at 05:15 on a Thursday morning at the end of 52 hours of the crucible, was on his knees holding his senior drill instructor's cover in both hands like a recruit hands a cover to a drill instructor. Cole saw him. Cole, on his knees, 4 feet from Henson, both of them on their knees in the sand pit, with their covers in their hands, saw him. For 1 second, Cole saw what Pace had been seeing for 11 weeks. He took the cover from Henson. He didn't put it on. He held it against his chest plate, brim down, both hands, the way Marines hold a cover at a funeral. He stood the rest of the way up. He brushed the sand off his trousers. He walked 4 steps to Henson, and he stopped in front of him. He said one sentence. "Recruit, I owe you 4 miles. We're going to walk him together. You understand me?" Henson said, "I, Senior Drill Instructor." Cole said, On your feet. Henson tried. Henson got to one knee. He got to one foot. He put his weight on the right leg. He could not put weight on the left leg. He stood on the right leg for about 2 seconds, and then he started to fall again. Cole caught him. Cole caught him under the right arm. He pulled Henson's right arm across his own shoulders. He stood Henson up. He took Henson's rifle in his own left hand. He took Henson's ruck off Henson's back, one strap at a time, and he put it on top of his own ruck. His own ruck weighed 62 pounds. Henson's ruck weighed 61. Cole had 123 pounds of pack on his back when he stepped out of the sand pit with Recruit Henson's right arm across his shoulders. He said, "To the platoon, platoon. Forward march." The platoon marched. Cole and Henson moved at the speed Henson could move at, which was about 2 miles an hour, slow, dragging the left leg behind them. The platoon adjusted its pace. The platoon, 60 recruits at the end of a 52-hour crucible, slowed down to match the pace of its senior drill instructor carrying 123 pounds of pack and one recruit with a broken tibia. Pace walked 3 steps behind Cole and Henson. She didn't speak. She walked behind them for the last 4 miles. The platoon walked behind her. At 07:48, 90 minutes behind schedule, Platoon 2053 arrived at the parade deck behind the crucible course for the Eagle Globe and Anchor ceremony. The sun had already come up. The sun was already up. That's the part that mattered. The EGA ceremony is supposed to happen at sunrise. Sunrise on October 17, 2014, at Parris Island, was at 07:02. Platoon 2053 arrived at the parade deck at 07:48. 46 minutes after sunrise. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reeves, was standing on the parade deck in his service Charlies. He had been standing there since 06:45. He had watched the sun come up. He had watched 4 other platoons complete their EGA ceremonies. He had watched the families gather behind the parade deck rope line. Platoon 2053's families, 62 of them, who had driven in from 23 states for a sunrise ceremony that was not going to happen at sunrise. He had been on the radio with the crucible course since 06:15. He knew there was a casualty. He did not know about the sand pit. He would not know about the sand pit for 13 months. He would find out about the sand pit at his retirement ceremony in November of 2015, when Master Gunnery Sergeant Kowalski, who had heard about it from a range coach who had heard about it from a recruit from Cycle 5, who was by then a private first class at the School of Infantry, told him about it in the parking lot, after the ceremony, over a beer from a cooler in the back of a pickup truck. Reeves would listen to the story. Reeves would not say anything for a full minute after Kowalski finished. Then Reeves would say one sentence. He would say, "Master Guns, if I had known on the morning of October 17th, I would have put pace in for a bronze star with V." Kowalski would say, "Sir, I know." Reeves would say, "I didn't know." Kowalski would say, "Sir, she didn't want you to know." Reeves would not say anything else. He would finish the beer. He would put the bottle back in the cooler. He would shake Kowalski's hand. He would drive home. But that's the future. In the present, 07:48 on Thursday, October 17th, 2014, Lieutenant Colonel Reeves watched Platoon 2053 walk onto the parade deck behind the crucible course. He watched Master Sergeant Brennan Cole at the front of the platoon, with recruit Marcus Henson's right arm across his shoulders and 123 pounds of pack on his back. He watched Gunnery Sergeant Devin Pace walk 3 steps behind them. He watched 60 recruits walk behind her. He understood, in about 4 seconds, that something had happened. He didn't ask. He walked to the center of the parade deck. He nodded once at Cole. Cole nodded once back. Cole lowered Henson gently to a sitting position on the parade deck. He took Henson's ruck off his own back and set it next to Henson. He took Henson's rifle and set it across the ruck. He put his hand on Henson's right shoulder for about 2 seconds. Then he stood up and he formed up the platoon in 2 ranks behind him. Henson sat on the parade deck. Henson did not go to medical. Not yet. Henson would go to medical at 0845 after the EGA ceremony, in an ambulance from Beaufort Naval Hospital. Henson would have surgery on his left tibia at 1400 that afternoon. He would be on Parris Island for another 9 weeks recovering. He would graduate with Platoon 2057 in late December of 2014. He would be a Marine. But at 0751, on the parade deck behind the Crucible course, Henson was a recruit with a broken left tibia sitting on the deck waiting for his EGA. Cole pinned it on him first. Cole walked over to where Henson was sitting. He bent down at the waist. He pinned the eagle globe, an anchor on the collar of Henson's cami blouse. He said the 2 words, "Welcome aboard." He stood up. He walked back to the formation. He pinned the EGA on the other 69 recruits. Same 2 words, 70 times. He pinned them in the order he had pinned them for 4 cycles before, alphabetical by last name. Acosta, Adams, Allen, Anderson. He had pinned Henson out of order. He had pinned Henson first. He had never pinned a recruit out of order in 5 cycles of drill instructor duty. The platoon noticed. The families behind the rope line did not notice because they did not know what the order was supposed to be. The platoon noticed. 60 Marines. They were Marines now. All of them, with the EGA on their collars, stood in formation and noticed that their senior drill instructor had pinned the recruit from the sandpit first. They understood what it meant. They understood without anyone telling them. After the ceremony, the families came onto the parade deck. They embraced their sons. They took photographs. They cried. Henson's mother was there. Marlene Henson, 47 years old, had driven down from Detroit with Henson's niece, Jerome's daughter, now 4, in the back seat of a 15-year-old Buick LeSabre. Marlene Henson had not been on a Marine Corps base since November of 2010, when she had buried her older son at the cemetery behind the chapel at Camp Lejeune. She walked onto the parade deck at 0815 on Thursday, October 17, 2014, holding her granddaughter's hand, and she saw her younger son sitting on the deck with an EGA on his collar and a paramedic kneeling next to him, taking his blood pressure. She walked across the parade deck. She knelt down next to Henson. She didn't say anything. She put her hand on his face. Henson looked up at her. He said, "Mama, I made it." She said, "I see you, baby." He said, "Mama." Jerome walked further than this. "I did it for him." She said, "I know you did." Pace was standing at the edge of the parade deck. She watched. She did not walk over. She did not introduce herself. She was the junior drill instructor. The families do not need to meet the junior drill instructor. But Marlene Henson stood up after about a minute. She looked around the parade deck. She saw Cole shaking hands with families. She saw Pace standing at the edge of the deck. She walked over to Pace. She stopped about 4 feet from her. She said, "Are you Gunnery Sergeant Pace?" Pace said, "Ma'am." "Yes, ma'am." Marlene Henson said, "My son wrote me about you. Every Sunday. For 13 weeks. He wrote me about a sentence you said to him on his first night." Pace said, "Ma'am." Marlene Henson said, "I want you to know that sentence got him through the 13 weeks. Pace said, "Ma'am, your son got himself through the 13 weeks. Marlene Henson looked at her for about 4 seconds. Then Marlene Henson said, "Gunnery Sergeant, I lost 1 boy to this Marine Corps. I gave you the second one. You gave him back to me." Pace did not answer. Pace could not answer. Pace came to attention. She rendered Marlene Henson a salute. She held it. Marlene Henson did not know how to return a salute. She had been a Marine mother for 9 years and a Marine widow mother for 4 years, and nobody had ever taught her how to return a salute. She stood there for about 2 seconds. Then she did the only thing she could think to do. She put her hand on Pace's saluting hand. She lowered it gently to Pace's side. She said, "Sergeant, you don't salute me. I salute you." She didn't salute her. She didn't know how. She hugged her instead. Pace let her. Pace stood at the edge of the parade deck behind the Crucible course at 0822 on Thursday, October 17th, 2014, with a Marine widow's arms around her neck, and she did not cry. She did not cry because she was on duty. She would cry about it twice in the next 10 years. She would cry once in her car in the parking lot of the duty hut at 2240 that night. She would cry once at her father's funeral in 2019, when she was a master sergeant and her father was being buried with full honors at the cemetery in Toledo, and a young woman she didn't recognize walked up to her at the reception afterward and said, "Sergeant Major, I'm Sergeant Henson's daughter. My uncle is a staff sergeant now. He told me what you did for him at Parris Island. I came to pay my respects to your father because he raised you and you saved my uncle, and that means he saved my uncle too. But that's the future. In the present, 0822 on October 17th, Pace stood at the edge of the parade deck and let Marlene Henson hug her and did not cry. The cycle was over. That night, 2200, Thursday, October 17th, 2014. The senior's office at the end of the 2nd Battalion Squad Bay. The platoon was at liberty until Friday morning's graduation rehearsal. The duty hut was empty. The squad bay was empty. The base was quiet. Cole sat at his desk. He had not gone home. He had stayed on base after the ceremony. He had filled out paperwork. He had filed Henson's medical chit. He had updated the cycle binder. He had eaten a sandwich from the chow hall. He had drunk 4 cups of coffee. He had, at 21:30, taken his campaign cover off his head and set it on his desk and looked at it for about 10 minutes. He had pulled the folded piece of notebook paper out from behind the leather sweatband. He had unfolded it. He had read what he had written in pencil 2 years and 3 months earlier. Distinguished rifleman. He had folded it back up. He had put it back behind the sweatband. At 2200, Pace knocked on the door of the office. He said, "Enter." She entered. She came to attention in front of his desk. She said, "Master Sergeant, reporting as ordered." He had not ordered her to report. He had not ordered her to do anything since the sand pit at 0514 that morning. He had handled the rest of the day on autopilot. He had not spoken to her since she had told him to get up. 16 hours and 46 minutes had passed between the sentence, "Get up, Marine. Recruit needs you upright," and the moment Pace stood at attention in front of his desk in the senior's office. He looked at her. He looked at her for about 12 seconds. He said, "At ease, Gunny." She went to at ease. He said, "Sit down." She didn't sit down. There was nowhere to sit. The card table that had been her desk for 5 cycles did not have a chair pulled up to it. The folding chair had been put away weeks ago because she had stopped using the card table to do paperwork. She did her paperwork at the duty desk in the squad bay during second watch. He saw that she was not sitting down. He stood up. He walked around his desk. He pulled the folding chair out of the corner. He set it down across the desk from his own chair. He gestured to it. She sat down. He sat down. He looked at her across the desk. He said, "Gunny, I owe you a conversation." She said, "Master Sergeant, you don't owe me anything." He said, "Yes, I do." He didn't say anything for about 30 seconds. Then he said, "I read your jacket on August 2nd, 2014. She said, Master Sergeant." He said, "I read it after the breakfast. Not before. I want you to know that." She said, "I knew that, Master Sergeant." He said, "How?" She said, "Because of what you said at the breakfast. You wouldn't have said it if you'd read it." He looked at her. He said, "No, I wouldn't have." He didn't say anything for another 30 seconds. Then he said, "I want to tell you what I said at the breakfast." She said, "Master Sergeant, I remember what you said." He said, I know you do. I want to tell you what I said. He took a breath. He said, I said, females can't cycle recruits. Females cycle paperwork. Find your desk. He stopped. She didn't say anything. He said, I was wrong on every count of that sentence. I was wrong about females. I was wrong about cycling. I was wrong about paperwork. I was wrong about the desk. She said, Master Sergeant. He said, let me finish. She said, Master Sergeant. He said, I have been trying for 2 years and 3 months to figure out how to take that sentence back. I haven't figured it out. I don't think there's a way to take a sentence like that back in words. I'm not going to try. I'm going to tell you something else instead. She didn't say anything. He said, Gunny, you're a better drill instructor than I am. She said, Master Sergeant. He said, don't argue with me. I'm your senior. That's an assessment. I'm giving it to you on the record. You're a better drill instructor than I am. You've been a better drill instructor than I am since Cycle 1. I knew it by Cycle 3. I knew it for sure when Kowalski told me to put you in for a Navy achievement, and I tried to write the citation and I couldn't write it because I didn't know how to write a citation that admitted what I knew. She said, Master Sergeant. He said, I'm going to write it now. He pulled a piece of paper out of his drawer. It was the Navy Achievement Medal Citation template. Printed out, with her name typed in the first field, Gunnery Sergeant Devon E. Pace, and every other field blank. He said, I started this in March. I couldn't finish it. I'm going to finish it tonight. I'm submitting it tomorrow morning. She said, Master Sergeant, request you don't submit it. He looked up. He said, why? She said, because if you submit it, battalion will ask why, and you'll have to tell them. And telling them means the sand pit goes on the record. And if the sand pit goes on the record, you go home. He looked at her. He said, Gunny, I'm going home anyway. She didn't understand for about 3 seconds. Then she understood. She said, Master Sergeant. When? He said, December of 2016. I'm putting in my retirement paperwork in January. 2 more cycles. Then I'm out. 24 years. I'm tired, Gunny. She didn't say anything. He said, I'm not retiring because of this morning. I want you to know that. I made the decision in August, before this cycle started. I had a conversation with the sergeant major. He's known since August. I'm telling you now because... He stopped. He said, I'm telling you now because the next 2 cycles are going to be yours. I'm going to be the senior on paper. You're going to run the platoons. I'm going to teach you what I know about being a senior, which is less than you think, and you're going to teach me the rest. And in December of 2016, when I walk off the parade deck for the last time, you're going to be ready to put on the senior's cover. And the battalion is going to make you a senior. And you're going to run your own platoon. And you're going to be the first woman senior drill instructor on the male side of 2nd Recruit Training Battalion. She said, Master Sergeant. He said, that's the plan. That's been the plan since August. I'm telling you now because, after this morning, I owe you the truth about the plan. She said, Master Sergeant, why are you telling me this tonight? He looked at her. He said, because tonight I owe you the desk. She didn't understand. He said, on July 28th, 2014, I told you to find your desk. I meant it as an insult. You found your desk. You sat at it. You did your job. You did it better than I have done my job in 22 years. Tonight, I'm telling you, the desk you found wasn't the card table. The desk you found was the senior's desk. You've been sitting at it for 5 cycles. I've been sitting at the card table. He pushed the citation template across the desk to her. He said, Gunny, I'm going to write this. You're not going to stop me from writing it. The sand pit doesn't have to go on the record. I'll write it from the rifle range. 89%, 94%. Cycle 1 through Cycle 5. I have enough material for a Navy achievement without ever mentioning October 17th. She said, Master Sergeant. He said, That's an order, Gunny. Stand down. She stood down. She said, "I, Master Sergeant." He said, "Dismissed." She stood up. She came to attention. She did an about-face. She walked out of the office. She walked across the squad bay. She walked out the front door of the squad bay. She walked across the parking lot to her car, a 2009 Honda Civic, gray, 178,000 miles, parked in the same spot for 5 cycles. She got in. She closed the door. She sat with her hands on the steering wheel. She cried. She cried for about 4 minutes. She drove home to her apartment in Beaufort. She slept 5 hours and 40 minutes. She came back to the squad bay at 05:45 for graduation rehearsal. Cole submitted the Navy Achievement Citation on Monday, October 21st, 2014. The battalion approved it. The depot approved it. The Marine Corps approved it. Pace received the medal at a battalion formation on December 12, 2014. Cole pinned it on her. He said the 4 standard words. He said, "Congratulations, Marine. Earned." He said it loud enough for the back of the formation to hear. Cycles 6 and 7 went the way Cole said they would go. He was the senior on paper. She ran the platoons. He taught her the parts of being a senior that you can only learn by doing. How to manage the battalion sergeant major's expectations, how to handle a parent phone call at 2200 on a Sunday night, how to recommend a recruit for separation without breaking the recruit, how to write a meritorious mass that gets approved on the first read. She taught him the rest. She taught him, without ever framing it as teaching, how to be quiet, how to let silences land, how to coach without correcting, how to look at a recruit for 2 seconds in a way that the recruit would remember for 10 years. Cycle 7 broke the battalion record again. 96% expert. Cycle 8 was Cole's last. Cycle 8 graduated on December 9, 2016. Cole retired 3 days later at a small ceremony in the battalion conference room with 16 people in attendance. His daughter Anna was there. His ex-wife was not. The Golden Retriever Foxtrot was at home. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, by then a full colonel, on his way to a regimental command at Lejeune, read the retirement citation. Pace stood in the second row in her dress blues. After the ceremony, Cole walked across the parade deck one more time. He walked alone. He walked from the battalion building to the flagpole at the center of the parade deck. He stopped at the flagpole. He looked up at the colors. Pace walked out to meet him. She stopped 6 feet from him. She came to attention. She rendered him a salute. He returned it. He held it. He said, "Gunny." She said, "Master Sergeant." He said, "I have something for you." He took his campaign cover off his head. He held it out to her in both hands. She did not take it. She said, "Master Sergeant, I can't take your cover." He said, "I know. That's not what I'm giving you." He turned the cover over. He reached behind the leather sweatband. He pulled out the folded piece of notebook paper. He unfolded it. He held it out to her. She took it. She read the 2 words in pencil. Distinguished Rifleman. She looked up at him. He said, "I wrote that in 2014, on the night you broke 89%. I put it in my cover because I didn't know what else to do with it. I want you to have it. I want you to put it in your cover. When you put on the seniors cover next month, I want those 2 words behind your sweatband. I want you to know they were there for 2 years before you ever knew they existed." She didn't say anything. He said, "Gunny, there's one more thing." She said, "Master Sergeant." He said, "There's a Waffle House on Boundary Street. In Beaufort, the one across the bridge." She said, "I know it, Master Sergeant." He said, "Every other Saturday, 0700. I'm going to be in a booth at the back. Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, bacon, toast. I'm going to be there every other Saturday for as long as I'm able to drive. I'd be honored if you'd join me when you're not on duty." She said, "Master Sergeant, I will." He said, Gunny, one more thing. She said, Master Sergeant. He said, off duty. You call me Brennan. She said, off duty. You call me Devon. He put his cover back on his head. He came to attention. He saluted her. She returned the salute. He walked off the parade deck. She watched him go. She unfolded the piece of paper one more time. She looked at the two words. She refolded. She took off her own campaign cover. She slid the paper behind her leather sweatband, where it would stay for the rest of her career and where it is today, in the cover that sits in the wooden box on her desk at the drill instructor school. That was December 12, 2016. Pace was promoted to Senior Drill Instructor on January 8, 2017. She ran 4 cycles as a senior. She qualified 304 Marines. Her cycles averaged 91% expert on the rifle range. She was promoted to Master Sergeant in July of 2017, below the zone, the promotion she cried about in her apartment in Beaufort. She was promoted to First Sergeant in 2019. She was promoted to Sergeant Major in 2021. She is currently, at the time I'm telling you this, the Sergeant Major of the Drill Instructor School at Marine Corps Recruit Depot Parris Island. She has been in the Corps for 22 years. Brennan Cole sat in a booth at the back of the Waffle House on Boundary Street every other Saturday for 6 years. Pace joined him whenever she wasn't on duty. About 3 Saturdays out of 4. They drank black coffee. They ate eggs. They talked about the Corps. They talked about books. They had both, by then, admitted to each other that they had been reading Marcus Aurelius for years. They talked about Cole's daughter Anna, who had graduated from law school and moved to Columbia. They talked about Pace's father Thomas, who had been diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2018 and beaten it in 2019. They did not, in 6 years of Saturday breakfasts, talk about the sand pit. They did not need to. Brennan Cole died on March 19, 2023. Heart attack. He was 61 years old. He died at home in his small house in Beaufort. The Golden Retriever Foxtrot, the second Foxtrot, the original had died in 2019, was on the rug next to his chair when the paramedics arrived. Anna Cole called Pace from the hospital at 1400 that afternoon. Pace drove to Beaufort. She helped Anna make the arrangements. The funeral was on March 23rd at the Beaufort National Cemetery. Pace stood with the family. She was in her dress blues. She was a sergeant major. She was 41 years old. She had been a Marine for 20 years and 7 months. Anna Cole gave her 2 things at the funeral. The first was Brennan Cole's copy of Meditations, the Hayes translation, the one he had bought at Macintosh Books on Bay Street in the fall of 2014. The corners were soft. The spine had cracked in 2 places. The pages were dog-eared in about 40 spots. The penciled underlines ran through about a third of the book. The book had been read all the way through 9 times. Anna handed it to Pace at the reception after the burial. The reception was at a small restaurant on Bay Street, 2 blocks from the bookstore where Cole had bought the book 9 years earlier. Anna handed it to her without ceremony. She walked across the room with the book in both hands, and she set it on the table in front of Pace, and she said, "Sergeant Major." This was on his nightstand. He had it dog-eared on a page I think he wanted you to have. I don't know what it means. I think you might. Pace opened it. The page Cole had dog-eared was in Book 6. Chapter 30. The Hayes translation reads, "Take care not to be Caesarified or dyed in purple. It happens. Keep yourself simple, good, pure, dignified, unpretentious, a friend of justice, God-fearing, kind, full of affection, strong for your proper work." Cole had underlined one sentence. He had underlined, "Keep yourself simple, good, pure, dignified, unpretentious, a friend of justice, God-fearing, kind, full of affection, strong for your proper work." In the margin, in pencil, in his handwriting, he had written one word. He had written, Devon. Pace closed the book. She held it in her lap. She did not cry at the reception. She cried in her car in the parking lot afterward, the way she had cried in her car in the parking lot of the duty hut on the night of October 17th, 2014. She cried for about 4 minutes. Then she drove back to Parris Island. The second thing Anna Cole gave her was an envelope. Anna handed her the envelope after the book. She said, "He left this in the desk drawer. It has your name on it. I haven't opened it." The envelope said, Sergeant Major Devon E. Pace. He had written it in pencil. He had written Sergeant Major even though, when he had last seen her at the Waffle House 2 weeks before he died, she had still been a first sergeant. Her promotion to Sergeant Major had been pending. He had known about the pending board. She had told him over coffee on a Saturday in February. He had written the envelope after that breakfast, knowing the promotion would come through. She did not open the envelope at the reception. She did not open it in the car. She opened it 3 days later, on a Saturday morning, at the booth at the back of the Waffle House on Boundary Street. She drove to the Waffle House at 0700. She sat in the booth Cole had sat in for 6 years. She ordered black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, bacon, toast. She paid for both meals. She set the second plate across from her own, untouched, the way she had set it for him for 6 years. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of yellow legal paper, folded twice, written in pencil. It was dated November 14th, 2022. It read, Sergeant Major Pace, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Anna got the envelope to you. Good. She's a good kid. Takes after her mother. I'm writing this on the anniversary of Jerome Henson's death. I never told you I marked the date. I have marked it every year since you told me about Marcus at the Waffle House in 2017. November 14th. I light a candle. I don't tell anyone. I am telling you now because you are the only person who would understand why. I want to tell you 3 things. The first is that I was wrong on July 28th, 2014, in every way a man can be wrong. I have told you this. I am telling you again because once is not enough for a thing like that. I should have read your jacket before I shook your hand. I should have shaken your hand. I should have said welcome aboard. I said find your desk. I have carried that sentence for 9 years. I am giving it back to you now. It was never yours to carry. It was mine. The second is that on the morning of October 17th, 2014, you saved me. You think you saved Henson. You did save Henson. You also saved me. If you had not walked up to that sand pit and put your hand on my shoulder, I would have lost the platoon, and I would have lost the cycle, and I would have been relieved by Reeves before noon. I would have retired in disgrace. I would have spent the rest of my life knowing I broke a recruit in the sand at the end of 52 hours because I could not control myself. You did not let that happen. You took the fall for me with your hands, and you put me back on my feet, and you walked behind me for 4 miles so that the platoon would see me carry Henson home. The platoon thinks I carried Henson. I know who carried me. The third is the desk. I told you at the office on October 17th that the desk you found was the senior's desk. That was true. I want to tell you now that the desk I gave you to find was a different desk. I gave you a card table in the corner, and I told you to cycle paperwork. You took the card table, and you turned it into a duty desk. You sat at it during second watch. You read Marcus Aurelius at it. You talked 78 recruits a cycle through the worst nights of their lives at it. The card table I gave you to humiliate you became the most important desk in 2nd Battalion. You did that. Not me. I want it on the record between us, in writing, in pencil, in my own hand, that the desk was yours. It was always yours. I just put a piece of furniture in a corner. You made it a desk. There is one more thing. In the band of my campaign cover, the one I gave you the paper from at retirement, there was another piece of paper. I never took it out. I left it in there when I handed you the cover. Anna has the cover now. She does not know about the paper. I am telling you about it because I want you to know it existed, and I want you to decide whether to ask Anna for the cover or to let it stay with her." The paper said, "I am sorry. I wrote it in 2015. I could not figure out how to say it out loud. I wrote it on a piece of notebook paper, and I put it in the band of my cover next to the words Distinguished Rifleman. The two pieces of paper were in there together for the last year and a half of my career. When I gave you one, I kept the other. I am giving you the other one now, in this letter, in pencil, in my own hand. I am sorry, Gunny. I am sorry I said what I said at the breakfast. I am sorry it took me 9 years to get the sentence out. I am sorry I am not there to say it across a table. I'll see you, Devin. Brennan." Pace folded the letter. She put it back in the envelope. She set the envelope on the table next to the untouched plate. She drank her coffee. The waitress, a woman named Darlene, 58 years old, who had worked the Saturday morning shift at the Waffle House on Boundary Street for 19 years, who had been pouring Brennan Cole's coffee every other Saturday for 6 years and Pace's coffee for the same 6 years, came over with the pot. Darlene said, "Refill, hon?" Pace said, "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." Darlene poured. Darlene said, "He doing all right today? You eating his bacon?" Pace said, "Ma'am. He passed 2 weeks ago. Heart attack." Darlene stopped pouring. She set the pot down on the table. She slid into the booth on Cole's side. She had never sat down in a booth with Pace in 6 years. She sat down. She put her hand flat on the table between them. She said, "Sergeant Major, I'm so sorry." Pace said, "Thank you, ma'am." Darlene said, "He talked about you. When you weren't here. He talked about you to me. He said, 'That's my Gunny. That's the best Marine I ever served with.' He said it about 100 times." Pace did not answer. Pace, in the booth at the back of the Waffle House on Boundary Street in Beaufort, South Carolina, on a Saturday morning in late March of 2023, with a letter in pencil on the table and an untouched plate of eggs across from her, and a waitress's hand 4 inches from her own, finally let her face do the thing she had not let it do at the parade deck behind the Crucible course on October 17th, 2014, or at the funeral 3 days earlier, or any of the other 10,000 times in 22 years a Marine is supposed to keep her face still. She let it move. She did not sob. She did not shake. She let her eyes fill, and she let 2 tears go down her face, and she did not wipe them. She let Darlene see. Darlene sat with her. Darlene sat with her until the coffee was cold. That's most of the story. The rest is short. Pace finished the meal. She paid for both plates. She left Darlene a $40 tip on a $14 bill. She walked out to her car. She drove back to Parris Island. She kept going to the Waffle House every other Saturday after that. She sat in the same booth. She ordered the same coffee. She paid for 2 plates. She set the second one across from her, untouched. Darlene poured her coffee. They didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. She has done this for 14 months at the time I'm telling you this. Anna Cole came down to Parris Island in June of 2023 for the change of command at the drill instructor school. Pace was assuming the sergeant major billet. Anna sat in the second row with Pace's parents, Thomas and Maria, by then both 77 years old, Thomas with a cane, Maria with a hearing aid in each ear. Anna sat next to them. She had brought her father's campaign cover in a small wooden box. After the ceremony, she handed the box to Pace in the parking lot. She said, "Sergeant Major, he wanted you to have it. I think he wanted you to know what was in it." Pace took the box. She opened it in her office that night. She pulled the cover out. She turned it over. She reached behind the leather sweatband. The piece of notebook paper was there. She unfolded it. It said, in pencil, in his handwriting, "I am sorry." She held it in her hand for a long time. Then she walked across her office to her own campaign cover, sitting on the shelf above her desk. She took off her sweatband. She slid the second piece of paper in behind the leather, next to the first piece of paper. Distinguished Rifleman. I am sorry. 2 pieces of paper. In pencil. In his handwriting. Behind the band of her cover. Where they are today? I'm going to tell you what I think this story is about. I think it is about a sentence said at a breakfast on July 28, 2014, that should not have been said, and a sentence said at a duty desk at 23:55 on August 4, 2014, that should have been said and was. I think it is about 2 Marines who did not know each other at 07:30 on a Monday morning and who, by the time one of them was lowered into the ground at Beaufort National Cemetery on a Thursday afternoon in March of 2023, knew each other better than either of them had ever known anyone. I think it is about a card table in a corner of an office that became a desk because a gunnery sergeant decided it would. I think it is about 4 seconds in a sand pit at 05:14 on October 17, 2014, that decided the rest of 2 careers and 1 recruit's life, and a niece's last name being mentioned at a funeral in Toledo in 2019. I think it is about the Marine Corps, which is to say it is about all of us, which is to say it is about how a body of people decides, over a long time, in small rooms, at low volume, at duty desks under red bulbs at 23:45, who it is going to be next. I think it is about a man who was wrong and who spent 9 years figuring out how to say so, and who put it in pencil because pencil was the only honest medium he had, and who left it for a woman to find in a sweatband after he was dead because he had run out of Saturdays. I think Brennan Cole was a good Marine. I think Devon Pace is a better one. I think she would say he made her possible. I think he would say she made him possible. I think they would both be right. This is Master Gunnery Sergeant Hatch Holloway, USMC retired, signing off from a kitchen table in Oceanside, California, on a Tuesday morning in May of 2024. Find your desk. Sit at it. Do the work. Semper Fidelis.